right, you guys. So we're here talking today about the Medici family a little bit more. But like I said, you are going to be watching a documentary on this. So this is just kind of notes to get you thinking about the right topics that they go over. In a typical college online class, there might not be lectures every day, but since this is an intro class, I wanted to, even though we're going to be watching something. So again, this is just going to be probably like under 10 minutes. In the documentary that you either watched yesterday or are watching today, because there's two parts, you're going to be introduced to someone named Lorenzo de' Medici. And the Medici family, they were patrons of the arts, which means that they commissioned work. So the artists would get paid to make art for just one family. Like we went over, artists they weren't just nameless. To have an artist make your portrait means that you were rich enough to commission them. So having artists that your family sponsored became really important. And Lorenzo de' Medici sponsored Botticelli, which we went over last class with Botticelli's Venus, and also Michelangelo, who painted the Sistine Chapel and made Michelangelo's David, which we'll be going over. And as you saw in the documentary, there is something called the Pazzi conspiracy, where a rival family tried to get rid of the Medicis while at Mass on Easter Sunday, and largely failed. What's really interesting is this only made the Medici stronger. To have survived an attack like that just reinforced their position of power. And having enemies was part of just being a rich family. The Pazzis were not fans of the Medicis, but the Medicis also weren't really popular with religious figures either. So their lifestyle went against the church in a big way. And we have Savonarola. And he was I want to say a bishop, maybe an archbishop, I don't remember, but he was high in the political structure of Catholicism in Florence. And he wants to have the Medicis gone. He wants them gone. And he has this thing called the Bonfire of the Vanities, where he was so disgusted with what was happening with the Medicis, and other people were getting kind of fed up too when anyone has too much power. And so he organized this giant burning of art around Florence. And people were encouraged to throw their arts on the flames. If they want to go to heaven and not be damned to an eternity in hell, they have to throw the art on the flames. And so many pieces of artwork were burned, including works of even Dante. Remember Dante's Inferno? It was kind of a cleansing to get away from the Medicis, to get back to the way of God. And he really hated Lorenzo, and when Lorenzo was dying, he asked to have his last rites to be blessed. And while Lorenzo was dying, Savonarola actually damns him to an eternity in hell. So it's looking like, with our patriarch of Lorenzo dead, it's looking like the Medicis are over in Florence. Until we're not. So the Medicis go into exile. Lorenzo escapes after Giovanni escapes after Lorenzo dies and is already a cardinal. And he ends up kind of breaking the tie of who's going to be the pope for himself, which is a little weird. And he throws a big party. Really famously, there's a boy that is painted gold to celebrate the golden age. And tell me that doesn't sound Roman to you. Like, tell me that having a party where a young boy is nude and painted gold does not sound like something that, like, Tiberius would do. Or, Caligula or something. But unfortunately, the papacy becomes poor because of Leo X. And the sale of indulgence only becomes more important. Which, if you remember, selling indulgences is a made-up idea anyway. And so people are starting to lose some faith in the church. And to kind of get some of this reputation back, we see an investment. Oops, we see an investment into, why is this being weird? The Sistine Chapel, the Vatican, actually. It's not officially its own country until the 1900s, but when Leo the 10th becomes the Pope, he wants it to be a little bit more grand. He wants it to be really beautiful. And so he has the ceiling painted by Michelangelo, which we'll get to next. And just really quick, the Vatican's made up of a couple components. We have St. Peter's Basilica, which is like the big area. St. Peter's Square, which is where everyone meets and stuff, where you could go and visit. The Papal Apartments, which I want to say are over here or in this building. But that's where the Pope lives for free. And then the Sistine Chapel, which is where the actual inside of the church is. Oops. And to do the Sistine Chapel, they decide to contact Michelangelo. Michelangelo was a sculptor. He made David. He made David for Florence and the Medicis as Goliath. So he was kind of like subversive. He was like a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Like he would try, when I say tongue-in-cheek, I mean like he would try to make like little jokes or snide remarks and stuff. And the Sistine Chapel was offered to him kind of like to set him up to fail. He didn't want to do it, but he was really determined to do it. He was like, I'm going to show you guys that I can do it. And you think you're pranking me, but the joke's on you because I'm going to make the most beautiful art. And then when I'm dead, it will still be around and people will still be celebrating it. And so Michelangelo painted the frescoes. Like I said, the fresco is when you paint on plaster. And he made a bunch of Bible stories, including the creation of Adam, which is this really famous hand painting here. And the interesting thing about Michelangelo is he was really eccentric. So he was really famous for like not showering for long periods of time. But the really disgusting part, oh, so disgusting. While he painted this, I think it took him 4 years, I want to say, to paint it all. Or maybe it was 4 years that he did this. While he was doing this, he did not take off his boots. Ever. Period. Like he slept with them. He would not take off his boots. Kind of as like a, I don't know, I really don't know, like a reminder of suffering or to stay determined. But during the time that he's making the Sistine Chapel, he does not take his shoes off. And so his feet become like really disgusting and like bloodied and gross and so yeah, that's Michelangelo. So yeah, Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel, and I think that's kind of catching us up on what we watched of the documentary so far.